Hi, everyone. Welcome to Satire Can Save Us All, the webcast where we talk about cartooning and satire around the globe in the era of coronavirus. I'm Kevin KAL Kallaugher. I'm your host. I'm the cartoonist for the Economist magazine of London, the Baltimore Sun here in Maryland, and also for Counterpoint, an online newsletter. So in today's episode, we have a great interview with a cartoonist who's just published a diary about his brutal battle with coronavirus. We also have an update on our new social media strategy, and we close out with a conversation with our Muppet in Chief, Mr. Bowser McSchnauzer. But first, let's get straight into our interview. Today, we talk with Jason Chatfield. He's a cartoonist and illustrator who is based in New York City. Jason's work has appeared in magazines like The New Yorker and Wired and Mad and others. He is also the president of the National Cartoonists Association of the United States and is an internationally syndicated cartoonist writing and drawing the iconic comic strip Ginger Meggs, which is published daily in 34 countries through Andrews McMeel Syndicate. I caught up with Jason earlier today, and in our conversation, I kind of noticed a bit of a twinkle in his voice, and I wonder what that was all about.
Well, I am from Australia, and I moved here about 6 years ago. I moved here with my wife, who's also Australian, and we both wanted to. We kind of hit a point in Australia where we kind of hit a ceiling with both our careers in Australia, and there was much more opportunity here. Unsurprisingly, it's a pretty common story. So we didn't have any pets or kids or debts. So we thought, if we're going to do it, well, let's do it now. So we packed up everything and moved over to New York City. And when we live here, we live in Manhattan. We've been here for 6 years.
And so, I mean, you were in Australia, you'd done some cartooning.
Yes.
But in addition, because you are like also a stand-up comedian, right?
Yes.
And
yeah,
you
I
also
do stand up as well. Yeah.
and a bit of acting as well, right?
Well, see, I wouldn't call it acting, Kev. I'd call it the best of 110 takes, whatever we can use. I did, when I was a teenager, I did want to get into acting school because all my friends were going for auditions for acting school. But I got told by the head of the big acting school down there, the one that Hugh Jackman and Kate Winslet, Blanchett, and all those guys went to, a very prestigious school. I got through to the final round of auditions, and the head of the school said, "Jason, you said in your application that you're a cartoonist who wants to be an actor. I think you're a cartoonist who wants to be a cartoon." And I'm sure he thought he was being very clever, but that's a comedian. That's what a comedian is. Right. Is someone who wants to be a cartoon. So I've been doing stand up for 13 years.
Right.
And, New York City is the place to be, for a comedian. It's where it started. But there are more clubs here than anywhere else. They pay better than anywhere else. I can do the road from here. And I've been doing that. Yeah. So by day, cartooning, because there's no comedy during the day. And then by night, I'm Batman, doing stand-up comedy.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been amazing to watch you in a short period of time, how well you've done is a tribute to your talents and your capabilities and your ambition. So, we salute you. So when I saw in a news feed a story that you had done as a cartoonist about your affliction with COVID, it immediately caught my attention for several reasons. One, of course, everyone's worried about it, but also because I know you're a great storyteller. And I wanted to read your story. And I wanted you to share some of your story here now. Can you tell me where it all started?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you saw the story in your news feed. I've been trying to sort of get it out to as many people as possible, mainly as a public service to get people to take the virus seriously. Because, yes, my wife and I did contract the virus. And yes, it was very serious. We got very, very sick. We actually left New York before the lockdown, and we had some friends with a remote farm in rural Oklahoma. So we thought, well, better to be just the four of us than us being exposed to millions of people here. And also we have elderly neighbors in the building, so we just didn't want to risk getting them infected. So we thought, let's extricate ourselves from this. We traveled to St. Louis, Missouri, and stayed there for a little while. And unfortunately, we were very careful in New York, but we kind of let our guard down in St. Louis. You know, we were gloves and masks in New York, but in St. Louis, yeah, we kind of got a little lax with the safety. And that's also partly the series is almost chastising myself as well for letting my guard down. And that is where I actually caught it at a hotel of all places in St. Louis. Doing the backwards math on my onset of symptoms and when they started, because we drove to Oklahoma. We were staying on this farm. It was just the four of us, very remote. And then when I started showing symptoms, I immediately isolated myself in an empty house in Tulsa. And we just, battled out the virus there. And obviously then Sophie got it. And so then we switched roles from her nursing me to me nursing her. And it was very serious. And there's a lot of people saying it's just like the flu. And I think it's really important that people know that that's not at all true. It is. I've never been so sick with anything in my entire life.
Well, this was what really came alive in your cartoon narrative, because you took us day by day, didn't you?
Yeah.
And unfolded the story. And you did it in the classic cartoon, classic humorous way, where you did serious stuff leavened with humor at the same time. Something serious, something hard, something serious, something hard. Can you walk us through some of the days, how it progressed?
Yeah. It's interesting because when you think you have it, there's two things that happen. One, you go into complete denial because you're like, oh, I couldn't possibly have it. You have this sort of exceptionalism where you're like, no, other people get this virus, not me. This is probably just a cold. It's probably just a flu. It's probably nothing. It's probably heat stroke. You know, you have a fever of 105 and you're like, it's just heat stroke. You know, you all of a sudden you start furiously Googling symptoms of COVID-19, and all you get are these very dry medical, and they're all the same. All these articles are like shortness of breathing, tight chest. There were only these three symptoms, and those three symptoms were very vague. They were the same symptoms as a cold or a flu, and that's why a lot of people panicked and went and got tested. And there are so many overwhelming numbers of negative tests because those symptoms, they're the flu. So I really wanted to share not just the onset of other symptoms that you can expect, but also just do it in such a way that's more engaging than these very dry, very clinical articles, because they're so difficult to pass. If you're not a doctor, but B, if you're just trying to understand, all right, what should I expect? And as of today, as of this morning, the CDC actually released about 4 or 5 more symptoms, and we're at April 28th. I mean, that would have been so helpful to me when I first started showing symptoms, because I would have been able to get tested soon, because I would have known that it was COVID and not the flu. If I had known that. And so I actually had already put all of those symptoms in this piece. But not only that, I put them in the order that they appear, because the virus actually goes from one set of symptoms, and then there's a little break, and then you go into round 2, which is quite serious, which is the chest part, the lung part. That round 2 that goes for much longer, and it's much more difficult than the first part. So I was looking around and I just couldn't find anything that actually gave me that kind of information. And I've since had people reach out on Twitter and Facebook saying, unfortunately, I've contracted the virus. Your piece has been very helpful in what my wife and I should expect to come. So we know to get paracetamol. We know to get, something that's going to be something to loosen the mucus, like an expectorant. We know what and when to expect it. Obviously, it isn't medical advice, but it's a personal account of what was a very typical. I don't want to say typical experience with COVID-19, because everyone's experience with it varies so wildly. Some people have very, very mild symptoms. Some people end up in hospital, and some people die. So it's difficult to call it a typical experience.
Mm.
There is no typical experience with COVID-19, but the people who are experiencing it are reaching out and saying that it's helping them understand what to expect and when,
Mm.
which is secondarily also another reason I hope to share it as
Mm.
widely as I can.
So you're talking about these physical symptoms, and I note
Yeah.
too that in your piece, because you talk so much about it, really seems like this personal, isolated, insular battle that you're fighting. I'm
It is. It's a
curious
very
about,
personal thing. Yeah.
yeah, tell me a little bit about the anguish. I mean, this was the other part that, it's doctors can't put figures on, is the amount of
Yeah.
personal anguish, because you're residing in yourself, battling this thing for 2
That's right.
weeks.
Yeah. And you're asking yourself some very serious questions because the uncertainty of how bad is this going to get, and to what degree am I going to have to worry about, let's put the local hospital's number in our phone so that it's there when we need it. If I need to race to the hospital, if I'm having trouble breathing. And I do put in the piece, like, seriously, if you're having trouble breathing, call your doctor or go to the hospital. Do not wait to see if it gets worse. If you're having serious trouble breathing, you must go to the hospital. The anguish, I sort of note in day 1 and day 2 that after the denial, you have this denial of other people get this virus, but by day 3, you start to kind of panic and isolate yourself and think, oh God, I could actually have this thing. And what's scary is all you've seen is blanket wall to wall coverage. So you already have the anxiety of the invisible monster, right? And you have people using terminology in the media like the invisible enemy, and we're in a war. And all of a sudden, the enemy is upon you and you're fighting it. And it is a very personal, very internal fight. And while I was doing it, I was diarizing. I was writing down thoughts, feelings. I was making sort of notes on, symptoms and things that I was noticing. Like, I had one thing I didn't write that I didn't want to put in there because I don't know if it would be that common, but there's a gland just here in your neck that sometimes, glands swell in certain parts of your body if your body's fighting something, if your immune system's fighting something. And I did notice that this gland in my neck had bubbled up and really sort of become quite big and solid. And I sort of noted it down. And then when I sort of looked up other people's experiences, it wasn't that common. So I decided not to put it in, just in case people were like, oh, I don't have a bubble in my neck, I'm fine. People can do that. That's part of the denial.
Right.
But yeah, talking about the internal anxiety of it, it is a very lonely thing because you're the only one who can feel what you feel. And when other people ask, how are you feeling? It's so difficult to articulate how you're feeling. It's partly why I drew instead of writing some of this stuff, because I'm like, I can show you, but I can't tell you. I'm a cartoonist. I'll draw it for you, It was a compulsion to do so. But yeah, I mean, you do have this overwhelming sense of, oh God, all right, it's that clank, 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 clank up the roller coaster, and you don't know how high it's gonna get before, okay, here we go. So it's a very real fear and anxiety, and it is a very personal and internal anxiety.
So the battle, so you
Yeah.
gauge this in this long battle, physically and externally, internally in your mind.
Yes.
Coming out of such a battle,
Yeah.
throughout lives, all of us face all sorts of adversities. Some people face bigger mountains than others, and always talk about this notion that you are stronger because of your struggle.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's always the case. And it may be early days for you. Can you get any sense of what this struggle has done to you or for you?
That's a really good question, because my wife and I were talking about that. And when we've now returned to New York City, we're no longer contagious. We waited, and we sort of did discuss that. You sort of think we just went through something very psychologically, very deeply traumatic, and so there is a post-traumatic element to what you went through, because there are days where you think and wish you were going to die. I remember Sophie sitting on the couch going, I just want to die. This is horrible. She's lying there shivering uncontrollably and just with a fever and then chills and then fever, and then it goes and then it comes back in waves. And you just, it's very traumatic. So when you come through the other end of it, it's not so much that you think, okay, yeah, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. There's an element of that, but it's more, God, we got so lucky. We got so lucky. It's like you just missed a truck just missed the front of your car, and it could have completely totaled it, and you could have died, and you feel like you just dodged a bullet, dodged death. That's how it feels. It feels like you spun the wheel and you got super lucky. And to that end, you don't really want to try it again. You don't want to then think, oh, I'm immune. That's fine. I won't, no gloves, I'll be fine. No mask. We're still acting as if we have it. We are trying to protect our neighbors. Knowing that we had it now, we know that we can't have it and pass it on, but we know that inadvertently, through touching and moving things and we wipe down. We have a bucket of bleach at the bottom of our stairs of our apartment building, and we wipe down the banisters as we go up with bleach, and remove our shoes and all that sort of stuff. Wipe down the dog. We're not emboldened by having beat it, because we don't know if we're going to have to face this adversary again.
Sure.
We don't know if we're immune. So that sort of brave feeling doesn't really come through.
Well, I'm sure that it's part of the healing of this stuff. This is a long-term battle that you're going to be engaged with. On top of that, and now I'm just going to shift a little bit away from the medical side of it, because you and every person that recovers from this is now got to find a way to reintegrate themselves into society, and also, get their career back on track. And here you are, you do, particularly when stand up, you're doing a sort of a social type of thing. Cartooning, being a freelancer is tricky at the best of times. Now we're in even more challenging times. But also you have now this tremendous story to tell. Do you have any notion, and maybe you can't even think about medium term and long term about what's going to happen for you? Can you tell me how you're going to be managing things in the short term?
Career-wise?
Yeah.
Well, it was devastating to watch the swift and merciless death of comedy within the space of about a week. All of my stand-up gigs were cancelled. New York City shut down, which meant all the comedy clubs were already shut because no one was going out in groups. Comedy requires audiences, to be all in the same room in a shared experience. It doesn't work on Zoom, unfortunately. We've all tried it to do Zoom comedy shows. So that aspect of things is completely dead. That's completely dried up as far as live stand-up comedy. I don't know if that comes back the way that it was. All the clubs are obviously now completely broken, dried up, and closed. They barely, they were sort of operating month to month, week to week anyway. And as far as cartooning goes, it's a very interesting question. Obviously, a lot of other cartoonists are asking the exact same question. We're all making the same jokes as well. We've been in quarantine our entire careers. We've been training for this our entire lives. And you do get a sense that there is going to be a big shift. A lot of my freelance clients have obviously dried up because they've shut up shop, and they're putting a pause on all of their quarterly budgets for marketing and advertising and any promotional stuff and illustration. Personal commissions have kind of dried up because people's discretionary spending is they're being a bit more careful with their money. So not so many illustration commissions or caricature commissions or anything like that. The newspaper, I have a syndicated newspaper comic strip, And I am getting inquiries from the newspapers going, how much do we pay you again? Already getting those emails. And you know what that's
Oh,
like, Cal.
yeah. Right.
It's you just get that feeling. You're like,
Mm.
oh, here we go again.
Mhm.
Because as you know, and this isn't just during depressions or, recessions. It's the first thing that they look for when they're trying to cut costs in the newspaper industry, and is the cartoonist. It's they think it's this sort of fun, sort of ephemeral. Oh yeah, get rid of that. That's fine.
Mhm.
But it's not. It makes a very, very big dent in society and in history and the recording of that history. If you look back through history, you can read all the articles about what people were writing about what was happening. But when you look at the cartoons, you see what people thought about what was happening, which is a totally different form of reporting. And I think we're losing that when cartoonists lose their jobs. So the cartoonists who are innovating to get their work out there and to create their work differently, they are making some headway. And I've been paying close attention to that. So as far as my career, I have been looking at other mediums for getting my work out. I pay a lot of attention to where the trends are going. And this particular piece was very instructive for me, the piece that I made about COVID-19, um, because I very purposefully made it for mobile devices so that you could read it on your phone, because everyone's sitting around on their phones right now. Wanted to make it just scrollable, easy to view on a small screen. Um, Story is the biggest word. If I could tattoo it on my arm, I would. Story, 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 story. Story is the thing that connects us. It's the thing that we're able to use to communicate. It's every year I try and pick a word, almost a mantra, but like a word that really sums up my driving force for that year. And story is definitely that word for me this year. And I think story is the thing that is going to be the thread that carries the way we've been working so far into the way that we're going to be working in the future. Cartoonists are very, very good at portraying story and ideas that are maybe a little more cumbersome, to write out long form. So, in terms of where I see, cartooning going and like my career personally and things like that, I think certainly online. I think certainly on screens, mobile devices. I'm sort of in the vein of this COVID-19 piece, kind of now looking at, all right, well, how can I apply the skills that I have to these media, and what can I charge? So it's a very important thing, because people put more value on original art, as well they should, but they also put more value on physical, tangible things that they can print and hold. Whereas for some reason, when you send an online cartoon, and I'm speaking from experience here. I mean, I do online cartoons for Wired magazine, The New Yorker, for Airmail, which is Graydon Carter's new website, news site, newsletter. They don't pay even. I mean, candidly, $700 for a New Yorker cartoon in the magazine. If you do a giant online daily shout with, say, 12, 13, 14 illustrations and a story written up, $150.
Mm.
For some reason, because it's on a screen, it's deemed less valuable.
Right.
And I think that's the challenge that we have ahead of us, is that just because something didn't go to print doesn't mean it doesn't have the same value. It still took the same amount of heart and skill and talent and hard work to create, sometimes more so. And so you have this sort of, I guess it's a mental jump that we have to try and get editors and publishers and people who buy our work to kind of make, that just because they're only publishing it on the website or on their social media platforms doesn't mean it's any less valuable than if they bought it for the magazine.
Mm.
So Yeah, I think that's the central tenet of the challenge that we have ahead of us.
Yeah, I mean, so metaphorically, changing your New York Yankees hat for the hat of being president of the National Cartoonist Society, which you also are. Um,
Yes.
you know, it's a question about hope and possibility. What I gather from you and actually all the things that you say are exactly the things that I have been saying to people about the value of cartoons in the future and trying to find a way. I
Yep.
remain hopeful about the
Hmm.
future, a very different future, but hopeful.
Yes.
And you're painting a picture, a hopeful picture as well.
Yeah, I am optimistic as I think I don't know if I'm a pragmatist or an optimist, but I came up through newspapers. When I was a teenager, I was doing local newspaper cartoons, and I did that right up until last year. I was still doing cartoons for the local newspaper in Australia. I
Really?
started when
Wow.
I was a teenager. I only stopped doing it last year.
Wow.
I would still talk to the editors and the reporters back home and say, "All right, what's going on? Tell me the stories." You know,
Mhm.
every Wednesday I would do it. At one point in Australia, I was doing seven per week,
From
seven
here.
editorial
Or
cartoons for
were
the week.
you when you were in Australia?
When I started out,
Right.
and so I started out literally in the newsroom, sitting there with the presses and with the people running around and the editor in the corner office and the journos here and the phones ringing and the advertising people over there and the graphic designers and the editors and the subs. And then I did everything. I did everything from laying out pages to proofreading to obviously doing the cartoons and all sorts of stuff. So I applied all of those practical skills that I had from when I came up through that area into then doing the syndicated comic strip, parlayed that into doing editorial cartoons for bigger newspapers in Australia. And then by the time I got here, using those skills and figuring out how to do cartoons for the New Yorker magazine and all that sort of stuff. And then I sort of managed to, through virtue of being a freelancer, have a sort of a toe in each thing. So I do book illustrations, and commercial illustrations, advertising illustrations, caricature, live caricature. I've been doing live caricature for 14 years, um, and obviously editorial cartoons, gag cartoons, panel cartoons, a comic strip. Which is the full, except with the exception of feature animation, TV animation, and greeting cards. That's the full gamut of skills of the National Cartoonist Society.
Mhm.
So I like to think, I hope that I have an idea of what it's like to work in those different disciplines. And looking at the National Cartoonist Society right now, we have a lot of people who were working in traditional media, and are transitioning. They're either transitioning from them into new online media, or they're still doing just fine being syndicated. They're in their later years anyway. They're not going to change the way they do things, and they're going to just see out the rest of their career the way they're used to having done it. So we do have a new school and an old school in the NCS. The NCS has obviously been around for 74 years. Um, we unfortunately had to cancel the awards and conference weekend this year for the first time in 74 years. Hell of a first term it's been for me as president. But it is an opportunity. I do see it as an opportunity, as you say, to be optimistic and to use it to evolve the NCS, to incorporate more communication skills. Bringing in things like Zoom conferences. As cringeworthy as everyone going to Zoom sounds, there are really interesting, fun, and exciting ways that you can use Zoom to interact with people, with drawing, live drawing, but also showing things in a conference setting. And as you say, it is more intimate, one on one, when you're doing a conference presentation than if we were all sitting in some giant hotel conference room and the person's a little dot up at the end at the microphone at the table, clicking away at a keynote and going, "Oh, and this is when I met the president." If you're actually seeing it live on your screen personally in your own studio, and the person's right there as you and I are right here, I think it's a lot more personal, and we can really use that. So we're looking at reformatting the National Cartoonist Society conference to something more like that, where it's live video in combination with pre-recorded video, and really going artwork heavy and showing the art, showing the cartoons on the screen. Because, I mean, why not?
Right.
And also, as far as the awards go, there are ways to make that live and exciting and interesting as well. Instead of the same old format, the same old Academy Awards format that has been done for the last 74 years, there was a sense last year that we've been doing this for a long time and it's the same every single year. And as staunch an advocate as I am of, nice, good traditions that are carried through from generation to generation to honor the previous generations of artists, I feel like the format can be changed without dishonoring that aspect of things. And as I say, I came from a traditional background in newspaper cartoons, and I now work in several different mediums. So I can see where things are going in the short term. In the long term, to your question about the long term, it's a difficult thing to know, because every time we're building the road as we drive on it, and we sort of see these trends. And then what people like to do is find patterns, find trends and patterns where maybe there aren't patterns, but insist that they know where things are going. You'll talk to any head of a social media agency or a marketing agency or an ad agency, and they'll say, oh, yeah, we'll definitely, the numbers on TikTok will do this, so that way on Twitter it'll this, and then Instagram will get an influencer to do this, and that'll bump those numbers up. They speak in this vernacular where they really know what they're talking about, algorithmically and socially. But things change now so frequently and at an exponential rate that long-term predictions for media are as good as the napkins they're written on. So I always, I think of it. I just remembered something. This is an interesting one. This just reminded me of a quote. I'm a big fan of Winston Churchill. I love
a quote machine.
Anything
He
he's
was
written, his books. He was a quote machine.
Right.
Here's something that he said, "It is a mistake to look too far ahead. Only one link in the chain of destiny can be handled at a time." And that was at a speech following the Yalta conference with U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Soviet General Secretary Joseph Stalin, House of Commons, 27th of February, 1945. And I tend to live by those, that ethos.
In fact, you have it. It's so important to you. You have it on your wall, right? In your
I do.
studio.
I mean, I consider it. I consider that a pretty practical way to look at things, especially right now when things are changing so dramatically. I think it's a good thing. It helps ease that anxiety and uncertainty. Let's one link at a time. One link at a time.
So with that notion, this is a really great way, I think, for us to wrap up our conversation, because it brings in a bunch of things. First of all, any person who's had the great opportunity to hear you speak over the past few minutes understands that you're a man of great energy, great ideas, multiple skills, and when you look toward the future, you look at to embrace it and try to tackle it as best you can, using whatever you can, because we don't know exactly what's going to be happening tomorrow. Right. Exactly the same way that you embraced the challenge of facing down COVID when you had it. You didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. You're going to give it your very best shot. You were taking notes. You're using drawing. You're using your skills at that time to try to engage it and push it forward, and all the time hoping for the best. And I think that we all collectively are trying to do that, both in our lives, in our rooms, in our houses, professionally, are concerned and looking forward, just as you project. Then as our all careers, not just for us but our other colleagues, there's those big picture questions as well. And I think that people will gain a great deal of heart from hearing your experiences. They will also be a great educational opportunity. You're taking it by the horn and trying to do that. So I first of all want to salute you for what you've achieved in the past. coming from a foreign country, coming to America, finding your way. Second, when faced with a spectacular physical demands, you again face that down, still battling it today. And then as we look to the future, you are game and you're ready. And not only that, you want to bring all of your colleagues to your side and help engage at the same time. So my hat's off to you. Good luck with everything. I'm going to look forward to watching your story unfold in the times ahead. And we also want to make sure that we spread your story as far and wide as possible. And so thank you so much for coming on. The Satire Can Save Us All.
I appreciate it, Cal. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
It was great talking to Jason earlier today, and we really wish him well in his recovery in the weeks and months ahead. And hopefully we'll invite him back so he can share with all of you just how he's doing. Here at Satire Can Save Us All, we are looking forward to the weeks and months ahead, and we're expanding our social media presence and hope that you'll join in. To help tell you a little bit about that, I've asked Alexandra Bowman, who's our satire correspondent and who is on assignment this week, to take a break from her studies at Georgetown to tell us a little bit about what's going on. By saying, hey, Alexandra.
Hi, Cal. How's life?
Things are good. Things are good. So I have asked you, given you this other assignment, which is in addition to your assignment at school, to set us up on social media. Tell me a little bit about what you've pulled together.
So you set up the Facebook first, but as of very recently, we now have a Twitter account and an Instagram account. You can find us on Twitter at Satire with Cal and Instagram at Satire Can Save Us All. And already we've had fan art submissions, and we also encourage all of our viewers to tag us in things that you'd like us to potentially feature. Just engage with us, retweet, keep an eye out for what we post. We think it's pretty great.
So now you mentioned fan art. One was really great. I'm going to pull it up here. This is a piece of art done by Steve Sack, the great cartoonist for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. And we are so touched by this. And, of course, we're going to encourage other people. If they want to do some fan art, that would be great.
It would indeed. And you also wanted to talk about that we have a YouTube coming up.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to do is a lot of people don't necessarily have Facebook or access to social media, so we're going to be running all the episodes up on our YouTube channel, which is Satire Can Save Us All as well. We're going to post the URL for that, and so people will be able to touch base and see cartoons in many other ways.
Exactly. And we're also planning to cut up our earlier episodes into individual segments so that you can watch those individually.
Well, look, I really appreciate the work that you're doing on this, particularly as you've still got a lot of schoolwork left. And we'll see you again next week, and good luck.
See you next week.
Thank you. All right, everyone, we're nearly finished. All we have to do is close out with a conversation with our Muppet in Chief, Mr. Bowser McSchnauzer. Hi, everybody. So, Mr. Bowser, do you have a joke for us this week? That's what you promised to do for us, did I? Yes, you did. You promised to have a joke. You're supposed to have one every week. You have a whole week to work on a joke.
Well, I don't have a joke, but I will tell you this.
What's that?
I talked to Dr. Fauci.
You talked to Dr. Fauci? Really? What did he say?
Well, he said to me, there are two things that determine the spread of coronavirus.
Okay, what is the two things?
First, how dense people are.
Okay, how dense people are. I can see that. What's the second reason that we're the spread of coronavirus?
It's determined by how dense people are.
How dense people are.
Oh, yeah, that's right. How stupid people are. I didn't mean to say that. How dense people are and how dense people are.
So that was your joke?
Yeah, that was my joke.
Oh, man. So you did work on one, and you got Dr. Fauci in there, so you got it kind of topical.
Aren't I smart?
Yes, I think you're smartish. So, maybe you'll get even better next week, Mr. Bowser McSchnauzer, and have a joke that's worth waiting for.
I will.
So, thank you guys for waiting till the end, and also thank you for visiting Satire Can Save Us All. Please also visit us on social media. You'll see all the links listed there, and contribute drawings, ideas, thoughts, and come and see us again next week, 3 p.m. On Tuesdays, newest episode of Satire Can Save Us All. Until then, take care, look after yourself, talk to you soon.